So welcome back or welcome to the ADAM online program in April 2021. So initially, ADAM, Asia Discovers Asia Meeting for Contemporary Performance, is an annual platform bringing together artists in exchange with a contest of collective residency in Taipei, as well as a public gathering program to welcome visitors of international professionals and local audiences to participate in artist sharing or work in progress events. And since last year, ADAM has turned into online format in order to better sustain our conversation and exchange in this precarious time due to the pandemic. And this year, we are expanding the format of ADAM's gathering program. Normally, it was one-off in August every year. And this year, we are doing this in April, curated by Melati, and August and December. So to kick off this first season, I invited Melati Suradamung, the performance artist from Indonesia, to conceive and curate a program addressing our times in relation to her practice, including long durational performance, contemporary dance, expanded choreography in the contemporary art notions. So in this back to ritual duration, bodies, and performativities, Melati has also invited a number of artists, including today's artist called Korakrit, to share with us not only about their practices, but also how their practices can be bringing some new thoughts and reflections to address rituals in digital settings, in durational settings, and in ritualistic settings. So through this title, Back to Ritual, Melati would like to suggest and proposed how rethinking about rituals and dive ourselves about our bodies back to ritual has become an important vehicle for us to address and to again live in this now and near future. So I'm gonna pass my microphone to today's host, the artist Melati.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you are now. I am Melati Sudarmo, virtually meeting you now from my studio Pesungan in Solo, Indonesia. And I would like to welcome you all in our third day series of talks, which entitled Ghosts and Spirit in Our Contemporary Lives. During this pandemic, I have to say again and again, just because some people did not attend the talk series previous days. Yeah, during this pandemic, of course, we are all on the same page. Artists in general are facing the situation that globally impacted by the COVID-19. There have been uncertainty of plans and schedules, restricted mobilities, delayed rhythm of productions, and so on and so on. Nevertheless, in our creative genre, we seek for many possibilities to adjust with and to overcome with this condition by keeping our pace and senses in our lives. However, digital communication and technology give the possibility for us to meet and connect in many ways, as for example, what we are doing now in our virtual space. As an artist whose practice is using the body as a main medium and who has been dealing with philosophy of rituals, traditions, psychology, and history of mankind, I was intrigued to have conversations, some sharing moments, and further discussion on how the rituals encompass our art practice today. At this opportunity, I am inviting friends and colleagues in performance art practice. Before the previous 2 days, we have Diane Butler from Bali and the US. And we had yesterday Natasha Tonte from Indonesia. Today we're going to have Korakrit, Arunanondchai, and tomorrow we're going to have Mike Stewart. And on the last day, I will be guest for Riverlin. So these friends whose practice I consider are embodying the elements of ritual, spirituality, and memory, psyche, and indeterminate time and space. I'm hoping we will be able to broaden our perspective and seeing and relating our spirit of creations through this entangled series by listening and making dialogues with them. Yeah, if rituals considered as a set of actions and activities involving gestures, language, and objects that happen in a specific space to engage with the influence of spirituality, how do we get inspired by them in our contemporary lives? In what means can we connect rituals with the history of our culture and our social environment now? In today's session, which focuses on the ghost and spirit in our contemporary lives, we have Korakrit Arunanondchai as our guest. Welcome, Korakrit. I have personally met Korakrit actually maybe before 2018, but in 2018 in Bangkok, during the Bangkok Biennale event, we went to some dinner together and something like that. But at that time, I had the opportunity in Bangkok to visit Ghost 2561. It was an exhibition and performance programs which he curated. It reminds me back in 1999 when I was still in Germany, I was visiting also a festival, the De Geister, the Festival of Ghosts in Tacheles in Berlin. Tacheles not existing anymore. And it was organized also by friends, Charlotte and Heike. But this event was more like introducing like the Asian view on ghosts and spirits and spirituality. So they invite many dance companies, dance group, exhibitions, also artists from mostly from Southeast Asia and China, Japan, and Korea, and Taiwan. And this event was more building a kind of cultural encounters. And but through the Ghost 2561 festival that Korakrit was curating, I was triggered to think more into the embodied ideas of spirits into contemporary language. I don't know if my English is correct, but something like that, which considers the use of data system. Images, moving images, objects, performing bodies are becoming platform as intertwining platforms, actually, between reality and the unseen world to the future. In this context, I'm inviting Korakrit Arunanondchai today, and I'm going to tell a little bit a short biography of him. Korakrit Arunanondchai lives in Bangkok and New York. He's a Thai-born artist who splits his time between Bangkok and New York as a multidisciplinary practice that embraces video, installation, painting, sculpture, and performance. The range of his references is equally expansive, melding techno-animism, the Anthropocene, human cognition, spirituality, and Thai hip-hop, an enthusiastic blend of East and West, old and new, that has made his work among the best circulated on the global art scene in recent years. I hope you have received some link from our organizers to view some of his videos, which was No History in a Room Filled with People with Funny Names, number 5, and another video Together in Room Filled with People with Funny Names was a performance documentation he performed at, during the Performa in New York. And yeah, so he's been circling in different places in the world, in the important spots of visual arts since 2013, and including MoMA, PS1 New York, Palais de Tokyo, Paris, Marc Belgium, and he was participating also in the Guangzhou Biennale, and in Migros Museum Zurich, in Chiasma, Foundation Louis Vuitton, and more and more and more. And so we will have a presentation today, a little bit different than yesterday, that Korakrit and I agreed to, to keep into sections. And so we will have his presentations, his sharing, some videos and some thoughts. And then we will, open for per session to a Q&A or response from you. And yes, welcome, Korakrit, and the time is yours.
Okay. Actually, the last performance I've seen in person is actually a Melati's performance as part of the Bangkok Art Biennial. So it's before the lockdown, so it's quite interesting. It's like anyways, yeah, so I mean, can we play the trailer for Ghost 2561 team? Trailer video. The year 2561.
ได้ยินเสียงเพลง
I hear a song
จากโลกที่ไม่คุ้นเคย
from a world not so familiar,
จะเชื่อมโยงกันได้
relatable
ผ่านแสง
through the projected light. Okay, and then we can go to the images on flash art. Okay, anyways, yeah, if you can, yeah, to the images, just keep scrolling through. So in 2018 in Bangkok, me and some collaborators started something in between a time-based media festival and a triennial, because it's supposed to happen every 3 years, called Ghost 2561. And 2561 is essentially it's a Thai year, or it's actually the year 2018 on the Buddhist calendar. So it's 2018 is the Western calendar, which is actually a Christian calendar. I think it's after Jesus died, and 2000, like the Buddhist calendar, is essentially after Buddha achieved nirvana, apparently. So you know, the 2561 is the addition of goals that I curated. And the idea is that I did the first one, and every 3 years there would be a new curator that would, you know, it would be goals and then something else, whatever like the next versions of it is. Originally, you know, I think at first I wanted to organize a group exhibition based on my interests. And then after a lot of conversation, me and the team, we kind of came to a point to understand that what we wanted to create was more of a platform to have a kind of continued discussion, essentially like something that would be able to take a set of ideas and go forward. Maybe can you go back to the first image on the flash art, first image? Okay, anyways, I'm gonna keep talking. So yeah, so we wanted, yeah, that's good. So we wanted to kind of create a flat platform and a set of ideas about how to essentially how to think about contemporary art in the very specific context of Thailand, you know, within Thailand, and then have those sets of ideas essentially move and grow forward in time, you know. And this was in this 1 year where there was actually quite a few biennials started. It was really a year that it felt like Thailand was particularly, yeah, Bangkok was kind of like where everyone was kind of doing this like art biennials all at the same time. There was Thailand Biennial, which was the government sponsored one. There was a Bangkok Art Biennial, which is this really big international biennial that's funded by, it's essentially the biggest business conglomerate in Thailand. And then there was one called Bangkok Biennial that's almost a very grassroots antithesis to the Bangkok Art Biennial, you know, almost as the underground to the establishment. And then I always thought that like, I think if you, I think in a way, more art makes you able, when you see more art, you're able to kind of like see art better. And in a way, like more, maybe the same applies where more festivals or more biennials also help you see the idea of exhibition making and biennials better. So actually I wanted to start this triennial that year where there's just seems like there's a lot, and you know, and try to really fill in my opinion, what was a kind of missing link, you know, and with the goal of really like first and foremost really trying to address like a Thai audience with a very kind of with sort of like starting from my interest, a kind of programming that feels very you know, at least contemporary issues that were at stake to me, you know. And this came in a time when I think a lot of I think a lot of artwork in the main discourse in the contemporary art world in Thailand felt very, very polarized, you know, like all the kind of critical discourse essentially functioned around essentially kind of this sort of like bigger scale politics, essentially the military versus the people, you know, and I think everything kind of ended up being sucked into this kind of bigger kind of like which side are you on kind of a like discourse. And then essentially with Ghost, I think I had, so my experience, and actually from talking to a lot of people in this country about contemporary art, and especially like contemporary art that comes from the West, is that they feel to be this invisible wall where you know, essentially most of this exhibitions you go to function on the idea of like this like white box, and you kind of come into a space, you see something that was imported from a foreign context, and then you have this sort of like press kind of press release wall text, and then you're kind of, and then you ask a question like, what is this about? And then you either kind of walk out being like, oh, I get it, or I don't get it, you know? And for me, and actually for us, for the team, we were looking a lot at, you know, fundamentally this country and the ways in which people operate being very, very animistic, you know? I think like, I think many countries in the global south, but particularly in Thailand, we there's a kind of merging of sort of like kind of like localized subjectivities, animism goes in like into just like very like everyday life. You know, you can kind of like, I feel like most people believe in some form of hybrid spirituality, as in, you know, like that like trees have spirits in them, like, you know, like most people's lives, you know, are dictated by some kind of spiritual belief in the supernatural, you know, whether, and this isn't really something that's maybe like located in the past, but it's like it's felt through and normalized through like everyday presence, you know. And I wanted to, like, I guess on one hand, for me, growing up in Thailand, I felt a lot of times very oppressed by these sort of kind of superstitions, you know, because it felt like something that was like decided a long time ago, and you couldn't really argue with it, you know. Let's say something like feng shui, you couldn't really argue with something that was like kind of like almost like a closed box of decisions. You could only kind of obey, you know. And I felt like, just based from my own practice and my own research and having spent a lot of time in the West and kind of looking back at all these animistic tradition, that essentially there are almost all these ways of, you know, these kind of like very organic collected subjectivities, you know. Essentially they're storytellings. They're like storytellings over storytellings over storytellings, you know. And so I wanted to combine this view where, okay, maybe instead of thinking about artists like contemporary art, like we can think about like artists as storytellers, you know. And then we can think about the work almost as if like the work in itself are essentially ghosts, or like, you know, the story. And so the whole the triennial function on this kind of metaphor of, you know, like the ghost, the host, and you know, and the act of procession, and this kind of applied on in, you know, in yeah, and in instead of, yeah, so we like really tried to not use this idea of contemporary art, but that we were going to introduce actually like contemporary art through this rubric of like storytelling and kind of sort of embracing like the most like localized subjectivity as possible. If you're not familiar with the list of the artists that we were chose to kind of exhibit and participate in this triennial, like many, I would say 70% are, you know, outside of Thailand. You know, many are Western. And so I think for me and the organizers, it was very important to kind of allow the work or these stories to sort of make their own subjective, sort of possess almost kind of like a localized subjectivity, like almost as if like there were shamans that were like, you know, the local bodies in Bangkok waiting to be possessed by these work, and then that it would be translated. So we decided not to have any wall text at all, or any kind of very sort of like descriptive kind of text. The curatorial letter and many of the texts involved in the exhibition were actually almost more like these very kind of like poetic letters that were written, not really explaining the works, but more like trying to open up this sort of space of storytelling. And we started this school called Classroom of Storytellers, where we had different people. Like it was a free school for 3 months where different people would apply. And we had actually translated all these different texts that are relating sort of, it was almost as if in my mind, the work, like I have to say a lot of the work that were curated in this triennial was actually about technology, or like Melati said, the invisible world, or the networks created like essentially by the tools and the vehicles and of the membranes of the invisible world, and that goes from media, like the internet, like different kind of like sort of like contemporary sort of ideas. Like one of the work in the exhibition by the artist Josh Klein was specifically about universal basic income, which was an idea that's starting to become sort of very talked about in American politics, but also within Thai politics in that year during 2018. It was the first kind of introduction of the idea of UBIs, so so it was almost as if these different stories about essentially the invisible world, that kind of just like these systems that link us all. Like I almost felt like as if like like all these like that if you kind of overlap like the bubbles between all these stories, in the middle of that overlap, you would kind of have essentially the story, the story of like our time today, our time right in that moment in 2018, and so for the classroom, we curated a bunch of different texts, some written by like the artist, let's say Hitostero, who's a part of the exhibition, but mostly almost like we felt like texts that were actually would kind of, be used as like tools to navigate and open up this overlap of this invisible, like, overlap of all the stories that we talk about. And then we kind of turned those texts into essentially like a classroom workshop situation. And then afterwards, these 13 different students were then hired to work for Ghosts as storytellers. And what happens was that, like Ghosts kind of borrowed all these spaces throughout Bangkok to do the exhibition. And these storytellers were placed in all these kind of spaces in, wearing like Ghost t-shirt. And actually, as like the audience, most of the work are either performance or time, like essentially like video installations. And you would kind of, and there was no wall text. And essentially either you would approach the storyteller in a conversation, or most of the time they would approach you and just engage in a very kind of a like unscripted, lucid conversation about the work. There were, to me, they felt like the kind of shamans, and this allowed for like certain works to kind of like not be about where it came from or even what the artist was thinking about, but more like what the audience was thinking about from the work, and I would say, I guess that's in terms of like in a kind of just a very simple exhibition making like kind of a toolbox. That was kind of like maybe the thing that felt the most like different for me about Ghost 2561, is that there was this kind of like just a lot of organic like talking, essentially. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I feel like I wanna in 15 minutes I wanna move on to the next project, but maybe we can, if anyone has any questions about ghosts, 2561.
Anyone would like to respond or have questions to the Ghost 2561 festival? Anyone has been there by chance in 2018 in Bangkok? I think River was there. River, did you go there and see the?
Yes, I was there. I was actually there with our dear friend John Tan. So we were like hanging around the Art Biennale and the Ghost project. It was interesting to hear more from Korakrit about the underneath notion of this project. And I was thinking about like if let's say from the very, very, very beginning, how having become ghost or becoming ghost has interested you so much? Like what's your, early or essential fascination to ghost?
Right. I think for me, it's sort of like a bit hard to explain, but the whole thing I was talking about before about like feeling actually oppressed by systems of like state or cultural storytelling, i.e. animism within like growing up in this country. I think that's like a real common feeling, and I think within I think that there's something about actually, curating or putting together kind of an exhibition in Thailand and calling it Ghost, and trying to highlight like the idea of essentially what Ghost is as almost more like a kind of a story, a lucid, and a kind of like sort of a very liquid, like I guess there was a lot like to me in this particular country, the idea of spirit or ghost almost feels like stagnant and then just in a way like undetestable, and then so when you call an exhibition Ghost, but then you actually use the entire triennial and exhibition to try and redefine the idea of it, when you enter the work, you're supposed to then think like I essentially wanted to try and free the meaning, to take the idea of ghosts and spirits into this space where it's into like a historical linguistic space, and not because you'd be surprised like in every press conference or any kind of public facing thing, someone would be kind of like, oh, why, like, do you think ghosts exist, and then this is kind of very literal. And there's a lot of really interesting weird moments. So there was a lot of sort of, it's hard to explain, but because calling it Ghost and curating works where certain performance work feel, for example, Boy Child's performance was around a kind of dance around this sacred tree. And actually there were, Wang Shui's work, like their work was about actually spirit medium in Burma. And it was kind of installed in this traditional Thai house that used to belong to this man called Jim Thompson, who's like this really kind of like politically, he essentially was one of the most powerful CIAs in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War, and then came on to become this businessman and disappeared. But there were these really interesting moments when certain kind of seemingly supernatural things started happening, or whether it was real or not, as in like, like in the Jim Thompson house, some people claim that that they actually saw ghosts, and then we had to really, as in like putting art into stories, and then particularly into like ghost stories, like starts to actually like in a weird way like fuck with people's perception of ghosts. And it created all these really complicated situation that even to me as someone who like, you know, like it's sort of like, it's not like I don't believe in it, you know, because I fundamentally grew up with this and more, you know, but it just like at one point I had to sit and pray publicly in front of like and light up incense in front of an image of, you know, this white man, Jim Thompson, you know, in his house. And I thought that was like quite an interesting moment. And then there was like also all these other moments where it really kind of brought into questions the entire system of belief in animism within the country, you know, and I thought, like, I thought those were interesting, you know, it kind of that you kind of makes, by framing it this way, like the belief system and the works also, they kind of permeate each other, and it like creates this sort of like meeting of, you know, two systems that don't usually kind of meet in the same, on the same grounds at all. You know, I think that was like really interesting. And that's like something about, I think like kind of, you know, using these stories, these different artworks as mediums to kind of, not just to see the world, but to see the act, to have them kind of, that's what possession means for me, right? To be able to kind of really possess local bodies or local places and the local beliefs around that, and see it interact, see it kind of show the world, you know, like kind of like how the artwork also helps unfold the world around the artwork so that you can see it better. And I think that's really like, you know, when you talk about the idea of embodiment, that's like what we were really trying to do. And I think it felt, for me and a lot of people in the feedback, it kind of felt like that, you know? And it's like there's only like 15 pieces in the entire triennial, so it's quite small. So there was a lot of kind of attention to each one, you know, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting. Yeah, I think it's very interesting because, you know, like if you think about ghosts and in Thailand, and, you know, like the horror films, Thai horrors are very spooky, very freaky. You know, I used to watch, and, you know, and then I understand probably actually is similar like in other countries in Southeast Asia, how we relate with the ghosts, you know, whatever the image. Like Indonesian horror film are very bad makeup mostly, but now they have a kind of advanced horror film, kind of most, you know, like appearing, like presenting more the spirit instead of the figures, the horror figure, like in the, you know, like in the, yeah. But, you know, I think interesting also from the Ghost 2561 is that you and your friends try to introduce a kind of a local spirit in terms of art, and what is, you know, like the context of the contemporary art which resource can be also unveiled from the locality. And that was, you know, I'm also organizing a festival, an annual festival, now biannual, because we don't have money for performance art, but in a very local space, in a very simple locations, and can be visited by anyone without being, you know, like feeling like we are visiting a contemporary space. Mm-hmm. But that questions, that's a big questions. What is the Indonesian contemporary art? What is the Thai contemporary art? What is Asian contemporary art? As if contemporaneity belongs only to the West. And that's why I think with some of my curators colleagues for the Jakarta Biennale 2017, we decided to choose Jiwa, which is literally translated as soul, but actually spirit, and to evoke the local aesthetic, the local resource, and this kind of thing. So I think it's very interesting that we are like somehow like here in Singapore with the last Singapore Biennale, with different events in Southeast Asia, that somehow we are in the same page and like, you know, like pushing into the same directions and questioning what is the contemporary art, what is the contemporary art from Southeast Asia, from Asia, what is the contemporary dance is very much questions. In the dance scene, I think many of the participants also coming from the dance area, they're also questioning, so what is our contemporary, like, you know, like identity? So that's, I think there are a lot of homeworks for us to rethink or reconsider how we see our practice.
Yeah,
Okay.
You said something that, you know, I've been thinking a lot, that when you talked about essentially ghost movies, I've actually been thinking a lot that actually in, you know, I think in South, you know, like there's not a lot of science fiction that comes out of Southeast Asia, I'd say, but I actually think it's because sort of like ghost movies are the science fiction, you know, like the space, this kind of speculative space in which you think about that kind of science fiction movies kind of in the West from Hollywood take. It's actually, I think in Southeast Asia, it actually is the space of like kind of ghost movies, you know what I mean? As this kind of like scary movies, like kind of supernatural movies. And I do think like what you said, like you know, there's like a dichotomy that's set up in the West about kind of like the East and the West, and like, you know, the kind of spiritual East, especially, you know, like I think in Thailand, I saw a BBC documentary that talks about like the spiritual East and the technological West, and this dichotomy, and it's kind of you know, and that kind of, and it almost like sort of starts to separate, it goes into the separation of like the mind and the body, and then sort of like the past and the future. And actually like these spaces, like the kind of speculative past and the speculative future, also they're kind of, in a way, they're the same space. They may function differently, they may fit differently in the kind of contemporary consciousness, but actually they, like, to me, they are the same space, you know. And I think a conversation, and I think you know, that's why I think there's something about kind of taking, you know, like being like trying to also take, you know, like works from artists like Meta Haven or Hito Sir or Rachel Rose or Yin Cheng, you know, like whose work are like, you know, many of them my peers or my teachers, but also I felt like to take those content and being able to to allow to kind of put them in this framework, to kind of see them through, you know, this as ghosts essentially also, you know, because they're like these kind of qualities that like this kind of tool or perceiving reality that we have in, you know, these different like kind of like, let's say like cultures that we have, I don't think they're going to mutate, and they're not going to disappear, you know. And it just feels kind of like there's a kind of like very kind of like Western centric kind of mindset to sort to like see, you know, like these qualities or these kind of design of life sort of as sort of like not part of a main kind of progressive narrative, you know, as something that like is more antiquated or more, you know.
Yeah, I think also the idea of ghost is appearing within the belief system.
Yeah.
And if we specifically, it can be also translated like it makes people feel scared or fear, more careful. And probably in the old belief system, it is created to respect the nature, like a tree, that there is a certain ghost who lives on trees. Like we also have this kind of belief. And for that means like keep distance from the tree and do not cut the tree, because it's the house of the ghost who sit there, who protect area. So it's a kind of like not necessarily a figure, but it's some kind of a substitutes of figure, like a constellation that is existing, that to be believed that it is existing and is powerful, and it makes you scared to redeem your attitudes. And politically, like we can consider also like the scary politicians now, they are ghosts, yeah, because they're really scary. And in some area now, what happened in this world today, like in Myanmar and also like in Thailand, and so translate this, like if political situation also like a belief system, then we are facing real ghosts who are scary and but let's continue probably if no one is raising hand. Anyone want to respond to ghosts?
I just wanted to add some words that I mean, so far it's been interesting as a reminder to me, like, because Korakrit has just mentioned the West-centric notion of, perceiving the notion of ghost and things related, and I found yes, indeed, that the folk belief systems or religions actually have become quite precious and distinguished legacy or cultural heritage that particularly in Asia or / Southeast Asia, that in the contemporary art context, artists today in this region has become very fascinated dealing with the idea of ghost, not only, already going beyond about the religions and belief, but also, treating or making action or to embodying the ghost to talk about or to reflect about the ghost of the historical representation of a country, or how to use the idea of ghost to use the idea of ghost as a tool to deal with or reimagine the failure or the regime of any status apparatus in this way, like, and, like having the idea of ghost and underneath making art, for me, has become like something quite clear as a clear strategy artistically today.
I think it's like a very, like I said, it like I just went off about like the kind of West, but it's also on the other hand, like I said, I think like in particular, like I feel like what you said about, I think this is like a commonality in many artists in Southeast Asia, but you do sometimes feel jailed by belief systems, and oftentimes you realize that a lot of these belief systems are actually, they become sort of rooted as source of powers for kind of like sometimes like nationalism or conservatism, and I think I think there's like a kind of gravitational force or space for artists to kind of take on these myths, these stories, like that kind of, to as ways to really like open up like counter narratives, or like to open up the past in a way, to open up the space, the missing space, like the like within like the history or moments in histories of a certain country, and like I think for me a lot, which I'm going to talk about in the next sort of the piece, the video installation, No History in a Room for People with Funny Names. 5 actually is that I think a lot of like I guess my sentiment is also I think like the idea where like ghost in itself is a powerful tool, but it's also, it's both to try and see it not as a jail cell, not as a cultural jail, but as a kind of like space that allows for growth or something, and I think like oftentimes a lot of artists as storytellers, is trying to use this space to essentially rewrite like recombine sort of like, you know, like stories. And then I think this in a way is an emancipation tool, you know, like in Thailand specifically, like I think you could like, you know, like the biggest ghost is probably like, or like ideas of ghosts all kind of form around, I think talking about this contemporary time probably form around like, you know, the idea of the monarchy, and in particular the last monarchy, and, you know, that kind of came out of sort of this like Cold War moment. You know, there was a kind of conscious sort of like combinate like kind of making like a king almost as this like, you know, not only the head of state, but the head of religion, also kind of like almost taking like these rituals that used to be performed in the past and having like that part of like, you know, essentially making almost like a god king, you know, as a story of, you know, the father, the leader of the country, but also like all this as ways to kind of centralize power essentially during sort of during the Vietnam War. But as a result, I feel like many of the stories that I grew up with in my lifetime is also pretty much touched or influenced by this particular story and this particular agenda, you know? And it's, you know, and it feels kind of I guess, yeah, interesting, the idea whereas now, you know, like that that particular monarch has passed away, and now there's, you know, now is a time for me, it feels like a time of change, that also stories can be rewritten, or stories that felt can be even like understand. I guess that's what I try to talk about, like ghosts is this sort of like kind of like historical linguistic tool, and not really like something that is unattestable, you know. Which brings me to can we play the video? There's a bunch of questions in the Zoom group chat actually.
Yeah.
Should we address them before the video?
Yes.
Okay,
I think it's from Diane Butler. She actually mentioned that her Thai colleague, Dr. Surasak Jamungsan, in the Traditional Thai and Asian Music Department, Sri Nakarin Wirot University, Bangkok, made an interesting presentation about the history of the gamelan set. Gamelan set is the traditional Javanese, Indonesian Javanese specifically, or Balinese music instrument for the orchestra.
Yeah.
Gamelan set gifted from the Yogyakarta Palace, which is 1.5 hour away from my place, Yogyakarta Palace, to the palace in Thailand centuries ago. Surasak said that up to today, young people are hesitant to play the instruments due to the influence of Thai films portraying ghosts embedded in the sound of gongs. Just curious, does your work seek to bring this fear to light, or do you think that ghosts or spirit of the ancestor can be received in a different way? So I think it's a specific case. I don't know what film and which year. So maybe Diane can tell.
I can give.
Many films in Thailand have these portrayal of musical instruments and ghosts being embedded within them. Many.
I battle my fear for this invisible code of the past also not every day, but often. But I would say, yeah, I would say in the video, which No History, which I'm about to show a snippet of, the entire thing almost is written as this visual essay to kind of in a way to kind of switch a relation. Like there's a line in the video that just I think the idea of fear, the idea of respecting the past and respecting a certain goals becoming fear it's also it's more like, I think that's more of whether ghosts exist or not. That's more of people using like kind of these stories as a source of power to control, you know. And I think actually like I think respect can be seen as more of like a form of, like, in the best possible way. And what I wrote in the video was like, I think respect could also be seen as more like something like love, you know, like, and if you love something, you would want to put it in a place to allow it to keep existing, you know, because actually like, you know, like people, like based on your story, yeah, people would stop playing the gamelan, or actually like I actually say, okay, on a kind of story basis, you know, people stop playing the gamelan because they're scared of ghosts, right? As a result, like no one here plays the gamelan anymore. But on a bigger cultural kind of way, you could see like barely young people in Thailand don't play classical Thai music and Thai instrument anymore, because there's such a, whether it's stories about ghosts, it's actually more that there's so many rules and regulation based on how you could play it, you know? And these are all like ways in which like the state and the cultural bureau has decided that, you know, like if you have a soft power of the country comes from kind of keeping the past exactly the same as it was, you know. It may give you a certain kind of power in the past, but sooner or not, like it'll be antiquated and it'll just disappear, you know, and it'll just take more, it's kind of almost like science. It'll take just more and more energy and more resource to keep alive something that's going to die. And I think the most beautiful thing about ghosts and stories is if you actually allow them to mutate and kind of transform, if you give like the authorship of owning the story away, like that's the only way that these ghosts can live, you know. That's the only way they can like find newer bodies to possess, you know. That's the kind of thing with shamans. And if you think about it, right, like the ways in which like any ideas or any spirit possesses a body is it kind of has to talk through the medium of that body. So it's almost like it's always forever going to change. It's always forever going to be like something like, yeah, it's always going to mutate, you know. And I think not allowing the mutation is also putting it in the grave in a way. And I think that's the same with like, I think, you know, what I was thinking about with you're talking about with the gamelan. So yeah, I feel like I wanted personally to also not be fearful, you know, but to, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And maybe we can go further with the next session. We are going, yes, Korakrit, we want to show the, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to show just a little, the introduction to this video.
Yes.
เมื่อโลกของพวกเขาเชื่อมต่อกับจอหนังที่มองดูผู้คนเขาสวมใส่เสื้อของเราหายใจผ่านผิวหนังของเราสิ่งที่เรียกว่าความเป็นจริงถูกสร้างขึ้นมาจากคำพูดของคนคำพูดสร้างโลกแต่โลกเหล่านี้แตกสลายลงท่ามกลางภูเขาแม่น้ำและสายฝนกายภาพที่ยิ่งใหญ่กว่ามนุษย์
Make worlds, even if they're empty promises. Let this world choose its people. Of this forest allows a certain reversal of history to form itself. Unresolved feelings abstract into a form of power, constantly slipping away the present. In a dark cave, the slightest reflection of light on the wet surfaces transformed to a story.
เด็ก13 คนที่ติดอยู่ในถ้ำหลวง3 คนในนั้นเป็นคนไร้สัญชาติข้อมูลที่เราไม่ควรลืมเกี่ยวกับพวกเขาทั้ง3 คนคือเขาเดินออกมาจากถ้ำและได้รับสัญชาติไทย
Okay, so so while I was doing the research and the preparation to do the triennial goals 2561, I was also on my own in my own artistic practice working on this video installation, this piece essentially originally for the biennial of moving image in Geneva, Switzerland. And so I'd say like a few years before 2018, I was I was kind of obsessively researching this one myth about this thing called the Naga. The Naga is just like the snake or the dragon or the Leviathan. This snake that, you know, this mystical snake that when like a lot of people believe in it, and you know, when you see it, it changes your life, it makes you rich or so on, you know. And I went to this one place that this one province in Thailand called Udon Thani. It's like a it's like a border town, and actually has this like very, you know, like very, and like it's sort of like the epicenter of Naga belief, but it's also has its history where it has one of the biggest kind of American army base during the it has actually the Air Force base during the Vietnam War, and also one very famous black op, like essentially like an American, almost like Guantanamo. There's a place called Sight Green there. That's a place there where they would fly different enemy of the state of America and illegally torture them. So it's you know, it's this really kind of charged space, and I yeah, I also found like a secret CIA radar station there that now is turned, it's featured in the video, and it's sort of it's actually turned into now a museum, you know, which is really strange. But anyways, so I went to the secret Naga forest, you know, and there was a famous story that happened there where apparently there's a local movie projectionist, you know, like for outdoor movies. This happened around 40 years ago now. And the projectionist got contacted by a pale, very white skin, a pale man wearing all white, and asked for the projectionist to go essentially set up a movie projection in the middle of essentially what would become this sacred Naga forest. And then on the day of the screening, these male and female showed up all wearing white, and they were all in silent, not talking, sat down, watched the movies. The projectionist fell asleep, woke up, everyone was gone. He was in the middle of a field with no road leading, and all the money he collected turned into leaves. And then later on, it became this myth called essentially Ghost Watches movie, claiming that these different Naga spirits showed up one night as disguised as people, so they could watch, so they could attend this outdoor screening that they really wanted, that their spirits really wanted to watch movies. And I was very being a you know time-based media artist, I was very interested in this story, and I met later on a Thai a Thai film historian named May Adadon. She's based out of London, and and she had written this essay about this tradition called the ghost cinema, which is the same tradition where very similar tradition where monks would project movies on walls of temples, and but for different spirits to come watch, and people, you know, the locals would come and watch the movie with the spirit, and that in a way like enacts like a kind of a ritual, you know, a communion between a body of people and the spirit, like an idea, an immaterial idea. And I asked her where this tradition came from. I think I asked her where this tradition came from, and why it was so prevalent in this northeast area. You know, essentially these kind of like areas of Thailand bordering Laos and Vietnam. And her answer was actually, if you trace the tradition of ghost cinema, you could imagine. This is me piecing a few different stories together. You could imagine, okay, so first, the American soldiers came into this area, right? Okay, let's say like a border area, and then they wanna, the border between, let's say, Udon Thani and Laos. It's just these thick forests, right? In there's a I was included in, like, this piece was included in the Asian art triennial in Taipei, actually, and like and with this underlying idea of they call this whole there's a book called The Art of Not Being Governed that talks about this entire stretch of forest from southern China to northern Thailand as this zomia, which is these with all these hill tribes and and these essentially these forests acting as these almost like very opaque zone where, let's say, you could like walk into the forest one nationality and come out another nationality, right? The idea is that these kind of very, like, the state making apparatus or nationalities, all these ideas that were kind of reinforced by the invention of borders as lines, start to dissolve in essentially these very dark forests that where the logic of the line, the demarcation, like dissolves literally. And on that same note, you can kind of understand how let's say in this border area, when like the soldiers came in and they, like, let's say, want to walk in the forest, but in reality, maybe some of the villagers, some of the relatives of the villagers are communists that are operating and hiding in the forest, so there would be stories like, okay, you can't enter the forest at night because you'll get sick, and maybe some of the soldiers enter the forest and they do get sick, and then that's kind of, in a way, like shows you how ghost story can operate and be like how stories can be sort of like mobilized as ways to battle kind of like imperial forces or like bigger forces from the outside, right? And then later on, there's incidents of actually like American soldiers using film, like 16 millimeter film projectors and projecting abstract light and playing kind of different like sounds in the forest, and then telling the villagers that these are spirits, and that's maybe one case where you see like the medium of film or projected light kind of being used as a place to kind of physicalize a belief, to kind of perform the effect of like the kind of the invisible force, aka like ghosts. And then later on, as American soldiers decamped, they left these instruments to the local, to the monks essentially. And that's when the monks, and that's when how this tradition started, how the monks started projecting movies, onto the temple walls, but realizing that there is a connection, that somehow the projected story can sort of literally act as this kind of, almost like the shaman itself, or like the like become this medium, that connects, like that reenacts a ritual and connects like the visible, i.e. the body of the human beings gathering around the film to a spirit or a belief system or, an entity. Yeah. And I thought like, yeah, and this tradition today is still, quite alive and well in this region, actually. And so, I had such as you can see, like the like both the trailer for the Ghost 2561 Triennial and No History, like it shares the same footage, partly because didn't have a trailer budget for Ghost, but also partly because I think fundamentally they started, from this case study of this story as literally the DNA, for both the triennial and for the the video installation, like where it came from, this idea of like the ghost cinema, or the, this thinking about the cinematic apparatus as literally this perfect site for a kind of a possession to happen, for a story to be told. And I really thought about, wanting to give like this cinematic apparatus, or literally like the host, or almost like the site in which, like, to highlight that space, a position, and give it sort of like a character, and the character that like kind of like plays, or sort of become that space for possession, is actually the color green. So that's why, it's almost like the color green of a green screen, kind of like to not really show like the video, like No History wasn't really I guess I wanted to like talk about like the invention, or like the kind of the platform in which like storytelling takes place, and almost like it as a vehicle. And I wanted to give it like this kind of, like the character almost like the green screen, where you can almost insert any story, for it to kind of like have a place, So the green kind of takes place is in the video as the green screen, these green texts, the green laser that was used in this kind of thing that looks like a ritual. The color green was also played by obviously like the CIA listening station, radar station I was talking about, like called Sight Green. At times it was also played by spirit medium that I interviewed called Uncle Green. The green also becomes the green of the military who were involved in the main narrative of the video circled around the story of the 13 kids who were part of a soccer team that got caught in a cave in Thailand, and the rescue. The whole idea around is that in this one story of the kids being stuck in the cave, all these different people, all these different like kind of like, I would say like sites of power, albeit the military, the king, like Elon Musk, the American army, the Christian kind of like the different churches, missionaries, the different like Buddhist and non-Buddhist kind of monks in Thailand. Like all these people came together to try and like write the story of the rescue and take part of the rescue. And then I start seeing this thread where, there's a story that involves always a caretaker, right? Someone who comes to first a care receiver, or someone who needs to be rescued, and then a caretaker, someone with power to rescue, and that's often, and actually that is, come to like think about it, that is sort of the story that forms Thailand during the, I think the reign of like the past 78, I think like until now, like that's like in a way the story that the monarchy writes to the people, or the military writes to the people, right? In a way is like that they are, that they like that the more that the that they're these kind of like more powerful entities, and like it's kind of related to what Melati talked earlier about what's happening now in Burma and Thailand, or just that they're like these bigger forces that claim, that the population or the people needs to be taken care of, and that there's this kind of like assert like assertion of force and assertion of narrative, you know, of the caretaker essentially. No history refers to the fact that there is practically no like, you know, like history, like I think up until recently has since the military coup has not been taught in Thailand. And also even the version of the history that I grew up with and my parents grew up with, you know, kind of omits like so much, like, yeah, a lot, like, you know, it doesn't really mention like America's like real kind of like participation or like kind of relationship with Thailand during Cold War time. And it doesn't really, you know, like it's illegal to talk about the monarchy in Thailand, and now it's also illegal to talk about by default the military. So there's a lot of these sort of very important historical moments or stories that are never included, and you kind of have to find traces of it. You know, just like you kind of almost like, you know how it's really just like ghost stories where, you know, like ghosts almost feel like they don't exist in the same plane, but they have real effect on people. So if you actually want to see something that's invisible, you kind of look at like where it sheds light on, right? You kind of look at its kind of like effects on like physical bodies and kind of like the real world effect. And you can kind of start to see something like something that exists in this kind of invisible negative space through the kind of like positive force that it like presses upon on actual physical space, you know? And I think, yeah, like, so I think I picked the story about the 13, you know, like I gravitated towards that story because I felt like, you know, there's this story that's very visible on the news, feels very concrete, yet no one really knows like what happens in this dark cave, you know, within the dark space of the forest or the dark space of the cave, you know, within this kind of sort of yeah, like opaqueness, you can kind of write a new story. And within this story that's being written about, you know, like the kind of this nationalist story about like the state and the new king saving, you know, the people of the soccer team, you also like basically the story that all these kind of power players are trying to like write within this like cave story. You can kind of like, it feels like almost like the overlap, like an overlapping of the same forces, like also kind of you know, like I feel like this story also allowed you to see maybe what happened with like the other story prior that you cannot see here, something, you know? Yeah, and then that's why I kind of I said the whole video kind of centered around, you know, trying to, you know, essentially these 13 kids that were stuck in the cave and the different people involved, the different facades of like whether it was the state or like the spiritual or the army or, you know, yeah. So yeah, I feel like
yeah, we
yeah.
are. Do you want to continue with your performance video directly, or shall we open for?
Maybe we should like, I feel like maybe we should open for a little bit of I mean, if anyone has any questions or any comment at this point, before I move on to the next.
Anyone are pleased to ask or respond to Korakrit's sharing.
I have a question. No, but if, yeah, so please folks feel free to, otherwise I'm gonna go ahead first. Okay. So, yeah, so it is very interesting I have also just put in a chat about Horian, Singaporean artist Horian's work, green screen. Yeah, because this is like very interesting resonation about the notion of green screen and the color of green as a tool for contemporary artists to reflect onto the national narratives and all these mechanical co-productions. And so, but I got another perhaps separately in context the question about because in this video that we saw boy child perform with her nudity. So I wonder, but also like in this work that her face has also been transformed onto another being, like a little bit like in between human and inhuman being, at least from these images. So I wonder like how boy child's body as trans serve or converse in your idea of in this work.
Right. So boy child actually within I guess within my work I would say, okay, so I guess I have to say that over the past few years, she's the character, the kind of research character, the Naga, this sort of this symbol that I'm fascinated with. In the past few years, Boy Chow actually has come to play literally an embodiment or the character of the Naga. But the Naga also has this other kind of interesting historical. It's also perhaps another story I'm trying to free, right? I'm trying to, where in a way the Naga is, it's almost like in Mexico it'd almost be like the Virgin Mary or something, the Naga is very prevalent in like the entire in Thailand, but mostly outside of Bangkok. And actually, mostly I would say that most people believe in, there's probably more people believe in Naga who like belong to kind of like sort of like a lower income, and the reason being that you could actually say that like in Thailand, most of spiritual belief system equates directly to illegal lottery, essentially. Like the Naga is popular because because if you see a Naga or you see traces of Naga anywhere, you can decipher a number and win the lottery, and that's basically it's a real thing where in this country I would say 80 to 90% of people's engagement with spirituality is based on some kind of gains, either health or most of the time financial gain, and then my interest in it is you start to see kind of you start to see like kind of like a system being set up that actually like kind of almost like lotteries is weird system is set up to essentially like keep people in place, right? But it's also this promise of like magic in a way that you could be like the chosen one and only you, and maybe if you were chosen by the Naga, you would get like, you would be able to give a special hack to sort of the brutality of capitalism, right? That only like, there's system set up, but somehow the Naga is able to like hack the system, but amongst like, and I guess that's one of the power, but there's also, something like, I think to me as I like and that part, maybe that's not the most interesting thing about the Naga for me. The more, like this is maybe why that forest I went to for my research over and over, like that's mainly why people go there. That's mainly why people worship the Naga. But I also am interested, you know, the Nagas also used as a kind of it's almost a mascot for Buddhism, right? It's supposed to be this like first wild animal that's like recognized Buddha's teaching, and therefore first animal that's allowed to kind of like practice Buddhism, whatever, you know. But I think for me, the Naga almost stands for, you know, like in the story, the opposite of the Naga is essentially this thing called the Garuda, which is this the Garuda is often it's almost like a bird man or like an angel, you know. And the Garuda in Thailand is the actual symbol to the king and the military, almost the seal, you know. And you think about the relationship between the sky and the kind of opaqueness of, let's say, like a river with this snake lurking, you know. It's almost like you start to get this kind of like structure of essentially control from above, and then this, you know, and then the bird like always trying to get the snake, you know, and the snake become like that which escapes kind of like power, that which escape, like, you know, the dragon in I think kind of like lots of religions and like myth, like becomes actually like the representation to like the formlessness, sometimes like nature, you know. And it makes sense that like in the kind of a construction of like the state or the empire, that these sort of like formlessness, or these sort of like, in a way, like source for local power and source for local belief will often have to kind of be controlled, and, you know. But then I started looking into further about like maybe the more qualities that are about the Naga, like the uncontrollable force, is sort of it being this local god. It's kind of you know, like the story I told about like the Naga and like you know, like the ghosts in the forest, like, you know, with the ghost cinema earlier. So I start to think more about the qualities of the Nagas as almost like something that brings the people together, you know what I mean? A sort of like self-regulation, or sort of you know, it's almost like within like an anarchic kind of gathering, you know, that doesn't like a non-hierarchical form of sort of like whatever, like gathering or relationship, you know. And that's oftentimes what like rituals outside of like, let's say, like religions are, I guess, in the like far past. And so yeah, so I think for many of these qualities, the idea of like freeing representation, you know, like I think I started working with Boy Chow, you know, if anyone like Boy, she's a transgender performer, but also in her performance there's it's oftentimes, it deals a lot with this idea of like this kind of like within the moment, this performance of a kind of like liveliness that kind of just happens right there. It's sort of like can really be captured. There's sort of like you know, it's sort of like the idea of like magic is magic, or experiences like, you know, or like the idea of like being in the present or embodiment, like those things happen in this space that's almost like non-documentable, non-linguistic. And I think within like, you know, like that's a space when, you know, like human beings can really be human beings and kind of perform, you know, like that which cannot be like translated or like reproduced or something, you know. And I think, you know, like that wish, the moment wish is kind of like, it's understood within the people in the room, but like never able to actually like verbally translate it again or retold. You know what I mean? Like I think these kind of communications or these gatherings, it allows, you know, like I say, like it allows it allows it like a different kind of gathering to form, different kind of like transmission, a different kind of like message. And I think like, and I think it really forms lots of strategies like within like I think like I look a lot at kind of like in the video that I made after this called Songs Are Dying. I actually looked a lot in between like the idea of like spirit mediums, and it like overlapping with the idea of, you know, how like artists talk about their mediums. and like performance as a medium. And then also the protests in Thailand right now, particularly almost using a lot of performances as mediums, you know, to address this kind of class of people that, you know, feel like to us ghosts essentially, you know, unable to deal with the terms that within reality, you know, the given reality. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm like kind of sort of talking through a lot of stuff, but essentially Boy Chow for me is, you know, she played in the video, the green voice is her voice and she plays the ghost. And actually it's a 3-channel installation. And the middle channel is it's almost like the, you know, the bulk of the story in which I'm conversing with Boy Chow as the ghost or as the Naga. And then the right channel is like a kind of the same narrative but told through our 7 years of performances that we've done together, edited into this, you know. So it's almost as if, you know, if there's a ritual, and in the ritual you're trying to evoke or talk to a ghost, the ghost, you know, let's say like the ritual always involves forming a circle, right? But the ghost is always existing within the circle and outside of the circle. So it's almost as if like Boy Chow plays a ghost because physically, you know, there's this other screen, which is the space of the performance in which she is performing, you know, and she doesn't really like, and the thing that links to her within the video is, if you've seen it, is actually a cast of her head painted green. It's this like physical object. It's almost like the gateway, you know, in between like the actual, yeah, I think it kind of, does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that also already answered the question from Jiayu Korti. I hope because she also questioned about how you process with the performers in the filming, especially with the Boy Child and the group. Why don't we show the documentations that you have one documentation of the life of.
I'm gonna say one other thing because in relationship to like performance and video installation making, I guess for me and so I think for the past, I don't know, like 15 years now, like I always kind of like I think of myself, I think first and foremost as a kind of stage or like environment producer in a way. And that's since when I was an undergraduate student, you know, I like would produce essentially these environments and then there'd be performances in it. And in the beginning, it was mostly like musical because I think I was a musician before I was an artist. And and then oftentimes like one performance like plus the installation would kind of then turn, the documentation of that would then turn into like a video, like a narrative video. And then the video would often then be reactivated somehow turn into a performance. And then the performance would then make another video. So there's this cycle that's kind of been going forward. You know, I think of like this form kind of has been developing itself for a few years now, where I go into a performance, they go into a video, they go into a performance, and go into a video again. So the performance that happened that I did with Boy Chow and my other main collaborator, Alice Gavoich, is actually, we did a few performances together, one in Kiasma Museum in Helsinki, one in New York City, one in Marseille, you know, all of which were like the footage that kind of make up the performance channel that I'm talking about. Like, and actually the main I would say the main, one of the important, like the thing in the, for lack of a better word, I was using this instrument called a laser harp, which is this green laser. And it's kind of like, it's a MIDI controller. So you have these 12 green lasers that shoot up, and when you touch them, it plays different sound. You know, so you can imagine for a year before making this video, I was like performing a lot with this green laser instrument and we were thinking about the, and I was almost like, because the video before we were talking a lot about touch and sound and how I can kind of like communicate a script to Boy Chow who's physically performing, usually in a different room, but not through kind of like talking through touching in a way, and then so out of those conversations, ended up using a lot of the green laser as this connection between me and Boy Chow in the performance. And then later, that's why when we started making this video installation, it almost started off from this green laser medium first as a kind of starting point where, the ritual is going, even before I knew about the ghost cinema kind of aspect of it, even before ghost, I was like, invested in this idea with the form where the idea or the image of, touching this green light and this green light somehow turning into sound would be the ritual. And that's why the segment of the beginning of the video you see is almost essentially like a movie version of what the performance looked like, touching this green laser with different people kind of like touching the green laser together in a way, yeah. And then afterwards, this performance was then turned, this video installation was then turned into a performance. A year after, there was you can play the performance video.
This was in Performa in New York. In which year?
Yeah.
I think 2015.
In Performa 2019, in November 2019 in New York. And actually, I would say this was the first version. And there was another version that I felt was actually right in there was another version in end of February during the Dhaka Art Summit, that I felt like was, I don't know, that was the version I almost like felt like was stronger because it was just more intense somehow. It was like at the moment when COVID was hitting, so suddenly the idea of being touching, being close, like embodiment within performance started like becoming really kind of, gatherings becoming really like at stake in a way. Yeah, but anyways, so for the what?
You said you don't want to have sound for this documentation. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to?
Maybe we can forward in a few minutes. Maybe it's like a bit more. It's,
give some impression.
Maybe I should just say some context for us. I mean, so I really wanted, I really wanted to actually create almost like a experience of a ghost cinema. So instead of somehow being in a video installation and watching almost like a story based on the structure of the ghost cinema, I actually wanted to then recreate the experience of being in one, And this was actually performed inside of we got this big abandoned church, a really big Gothic church was turned into like a kind of venue. Sorry, not abandoned, in New York City, in Harlem. And then we tried to then turn the inside of it into this ghost cinema, this kind of like indoor but actually outdoor cinema that becomes so there's a really interesting thing where I almost became like the kind of the main storyteller, like the leader of I guess the ritual. But in the beginning, all the performers actually were like sitting with the audience, and as this kind of performance keeps unfolding, like almost at the beginning, the character was the green screen and essentially me. And as a performance, and there's this presence of this invisible So Boy Chow kind of appear much later on in the performance, but in the beginning, you'd see kind of like silhouettes, like she'd be performing behind the screen. So you would see like her silhouette, her shadow, or you just hear her voice, you know? So this is kind of like presence, like, you know, of the ghost essentially. And like my character storytelling and these different commands. And as the command happens, like more and more people from the audience would kind of start to join, that were actually the performers, would start to join the ritual circle, you know, as it kept going. Maybe you can forward the video, move forward a little bit, just like by like a minute or something. Yeah. Maybe a little more. Yeah. So it's a mixture between like, yeah, kind of like live ritual and you know, and I would say it's very like different from like I'm not an super experienced, like I said, I kind of make environment and stages, and this is like a collaboration between me and Alex and Boy Chow, and we all kind of like sort of did our parts equally, you know. So there's lots of dance, and I would say actually they weren't as opposed to on my other performance which I've done. There's not a lot of presence of the video, you know, that we wanted the screen to really like play a character of the screen, and there weren't like really a lot of moments where you would actually look at the screen and see like a narrative. That narrative video is like more important that the narrative, and that everything was sort of embodied and like happens like within that space. The storytelling didn't happen in the video, but in that physical space of the church, you know. And as it happened, that you would see the story, you know, and the mediums in which the story is told kind of like start to possess the audience in a way. Maybe you can turn the sound on for a little bit. No? Yeah. Okay, maybe should we stop for should we oh, we can like maybe turn the sound off. Maybe we turn the sound off and keep the video playing. Maybe that's like a better setup. Like I feel like we should we don't have a lot of time left. We should maybe open it up to
Yeah, we only have 5 minutes left, but we can extend because it's so interesting. If it's okay for you, like yesterday.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Any questions or point of conversation?
Yeah, I think we are having now many performance artists or dancers or choreographers. Like maybe they were curious how to probably how you set up the dramaturgy. Like do you have a dramaturgy like you know, like for the show, like for the performance, like first and then
the drama.
Because like for me as a performance artist, I don't put any kind of you know, kind of a narrative in terms of dramaturgy. But when I made dance piece, of course I made kind of a dramaturgy. But like the color, for me, the color green is the main symbolic message that covers the dramaturgy of the piece. And yeah, there is oh no. If anyone want to, I would like to open the floor for last chance maybe to know more, anything, any questions, any. Of course, we receive a lot of sharings from Korakrit and a lot of information, like stretching from the idea of ghost, spirit, spiritual, ritual, and political, and like symbols and performance body, and with the collaboration with the boy child and Alec, making this performance and films. Multimedia would say intertwining each other. It's very compact, and also like I have seen this all featured also in your sculptures, because you're also doing gigantic sculptures, almost looks like alive, and like as if the sculptures are
well,
representative
I guess I can explain something where when you saw earlier in the image of the installation, there's also the same green laser, and it's almost like a self-playing piano. It plays itself. So when you sit in the installation, you also have this effect where you feel like there is a ghost in the room playing like live soundtracking the video. You know what I mean? That's kind of like sort of the effect you get. And that's sort of like in the installation talking about like literally embodiment, and like, that's probably like, I think the coolest thing about the installation is that this kind of like the laser does physically, it's not like a reference to the film. It kind of is doing what it's doing in the film onto the body of like you as an audience, And in this performance, I would say in terms of the drama, I don't know like perfectly how to say that word, but essentially the whole idea we agreed in the beginning was that, okay, like in one performer, one contemporary artist who works a lot with performance that I really kind of I feel like admires this artist, Anna Imhoff. And in her performances, actually, or in the like performance pieces, you'll notice that all the performers are constantly checking their phones. They're always texting, looking at their phone, and actually, like, because a lot of she kind of creates this like shared like language of movement, from my understanding, around them. But fundamentally, like when it happens, like how they like that the invisible space that seems to connect all of them, when in like the script, essentially under the invisible script actually happens on this WhatsApp group. They're all constantly, and it's such like an interesting metaphor to life in a way. It's not even a metaphor. It's actually how life operates, And then for me, like in this video, in this performance piece, because there are so many people, very little time to actually like practice together and everything. We agreed that somehow that invisible middle space that's going to link everyone is going to be green. So kind of like all the lasers, the green, like anything that's green, essentially in like the entire script is written in this green character, essentially, like every time that like basically the invisible space that connects all the performers is actually like the green, the presence of the green. And that like tells people like when to do what, when to like, that's all the cues, that's all the things they're interacting with, Yeah, there's a part where like the green like moves from, let's say, like the big screen to my hand, there's a part where it goes into, like, I don't know, like it's like, I guess like, but I think that's an interesting way, at least for me, to try and access this space of, making a performance piece. I always feel like it's a hard medium for me to engage in, particularly because physically, like, like editing and like video editing is actually I would say the thing that I feel comfortable with most, you know, and then to kind of try and, you know, even though this is still video based, to not to try and get away from that a little, you know, to try and take the space, embody it within physicality, you know, like a ritual is what you know, at least. And I felt like actually the the one, you know, the performers in this piece, we casted all like professional dancers who were very talented, you know, and there was a whole dancing script. And I think it was like, and I think the dance was like very, you know, it was very beautiful. It was amazing to work with dancers. But the version we did in Dhaka, Bangladesh, just felt so, I think the context of the space, the gathering, it was in this like kind of abandoned school, but it just felt so much more intense. A lot of it because of its kind, like, and ritualistic, because of its messiness, because actually, you know, all of us didn't speak, like, I didn't speak the same language as them. There was even like most of them were not performers, you know, like there was so much kind of like, yeah. And it was the same where like the green, where everyone had to look for the green to be the script, but there was just so much more improvisation. It just felt more like a ritual because there were just like more gaps for interpretation. You know, like there was, it's hard to explain, but I guess within those gaps, kind of in a way, like maybe the performance might not look, definitely didn't look as good, you know, like here we had, this video is not good to explain, but actually imagine you're in this church Gothic space and the height of the ceiling is like kind of taller than it's wide, with these giant Gothic columns, and these lasers, kind of 7 lasers together form this really big like laser pillar architectural thing in the middle of the space, you know? So already you feel like in this kind of like religious site with this monumental thing that everyone's sitting around, that's just a larger like than our bodies, you know, made out of like webs of laser. Whereas in Bangladesh, we could only afford like the one laser I brought, you know, and everyone else had this sort of weird like laser pointer that they would use. And it just became so much more like
it was also right.
Boy Shao wasn't there, like Boy Shao, you know, couldn't go. So instead, everything Boy Shao really just existed just in the screen, you know? He was just dancing in the screen only and just never, you know, you didn't see her body physically at all. So there's just this whole like, I don't know, it was interesting.
Sometimes you have to adjust with conditions and situations, and, you know, and sometimes we have to adapt also our, you know, and do some compromise to still present our the best, but also with the local condition.
I think
and that's
okay, this performance, actually, I know what I'm trying to say now. I think there was probably too much space between people here, and within this performance in New York, it was kind of like, it was too visible in a way, you know? And that's what made it into a performance, was because there was like too much visibility, you know? And I think in Bangladesh, there was like we couldn't control the fog. It was like it was open air, we couldn't control the wind, you know, that the fact that and I think almost there's something about like the anarchic, like ritualistic energy comes through best in a space with like opacity, you know, that the storytelling took a place in a very not neutral, messy space where everyone had a different experience based on where they were standing. And I think there's something about kind of like, you know, visibility versus opaqueness, and how maybe in a certain case, like for a ritual to happen, it requires a certain kind of opacity, you know?
Yes, interesting, very interesting. And I'm curious if anyone for last chance to ask or to respond. If not, maybe I open all the screen first, and maybe someone raise up hands. No? Okay, because now in Indonesia also like people already because we are having a Ramadan time.
Yep.
The fasting, they open for their first meal in the evening after a whole day fasting, and I'm very impressed how you also managed to engage a lot of young people in Bangkok. You're very I think quite influencing young artists in not young, I think younger than me in Bangkok and in New York, both sides, and it's very inspiring to deliver this idea to your generation, and I'm very impressed also how you try to always to deal with the presence of body as a system, as a data system, or as a collective collection of data, and how we present the now and probably will be carried on into the future through this data system. And the awareness of the data system and in the relationship with the ancient knowledge, like we had yesterday, also a different way of processing a work from Natasha Tonte, and now today we have a Korakrit, which is very enlightening, and I'm very fulfilled again. I'm very happy to have this conversation with you, Korakrit, and finally, because every time when we have a time to meet in the event, and like we both are very busy with other people, but this time, yes, finally I got you here. And thank you for everyone. Thank you so much for attending this session. Tomorrow we will have Max Stewart, but because she's in the US at the moment, at the East Coast, and the time so much different. So we did the compromise regarding the time that it will be happening at 8 p.m. In Indonesian time, like Indonesian time, and like maybe later River can explain like 9 p.m. I think Taipei.
9 p.m. in Taiwan time, 8 p.m. in Jakarta time, Central Java time, and 7 p.m. in Bangkok time.
No, Jakarta and Bangkok same.
Same.
Oh, okay, same. Sorry. So that was 8 p.m. in Bangkok and Jakarta
time.
Yeah, Central Java time. And
Yeah.
so that would be 2 p.m. in Central European time. And that would be also 11 p.m. in Melbourne and Sydney time if you are from Australia, just for your information. So that will be late night section for New Zealander and Australian folks.
9 a.m. in New York.
Yeah, 9 a.m. in New York, yes.
Yeah, we might get some audience from New York. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
This is so nice. Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. Stay safe.
Take care. Bye. And see you tomorrow, everyone.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.